Welcome to Mozaik Unhinged, the podcast that brings together the people, the passion, and the stories behind Mozaik Software. I'm David Carr, and in this podcast, we'll go beyond the software to meet the people behind the craft. We'll talk to Mozaik customers, we'll talk to Mozaik team members, and we'll talk to industry partners, who will all share their unfiltered insights, experiences, and journeys that connect us all. We'll learn from each other, we'll share some stories and some laughs, and most of all, we'll build a stronger community. Because that's what it's all about. Whether you're in the workshop, you're in the office, or you're out on site, we're all connected via Mozaik in one way or another. And I want to share the stories that make this industry and the people in it so incredible. Welcome to the Mozaik podcast. I'm your host, David Carr, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Jason Balm from Waukee Cabinetworks. Jason, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
For the people that don't know you, obviously, you're an admin of the Mozaik user group. You're a Mozaik customer for quite a few years. Just to set the stage, kind of like give people a bit of a brief background on yourself and the business, and we'll start there.
Sure. I own Waukee Cabinetworks. We've been formally in existence, I guess, since 2015, somewhere in there. Had always built cabinets previous to that, as part of my carpentry career, but really started to change the focus to cabinetry around 2015, and now we're just we're a manufacturer that focuses on building cabinetry only. We don't install anymore. We just deliver cabinets to the job site is what we do.
Wow, that would have been a pretty interesting transition going from building and installing through to just building and delivering. Talk me through a bit about how that transition played out for you.
Well, for me, I was a trim carpenter for a number of years, so just used to the on-site service part of things. And when we started the cabinetry portion, it got to the point where I would be showing up out at the shop, and here I've got this space that I'm leasing and all this equipment in there, and it's empty, or there's very few guys because they're out installing. And I just got to thinking, this is just nuts. I mean, I need to be focused on the manufacturing side of things. So that was where that came from. I don't regret making that decision one bit. It's been for the betterment of the company for sure, just to focus on the software piece and manufacturing, and not to have all these other ancillary things in my way, I guess.
That makes a lot of sense for sure. And just to clarify one thing, the term kind of trim carpenter, obviously the term carpenter in different parts of the world means many different things. For me, like where I'm from in Australia, the term carpentry is like, framing up houses type thing. In different parts of the world, carpentry also means like, building cabinets and things like that. So like, what would you classify as kind of trim carpentry from where you're from?
In the U.S., I guess trim carpenter or finish carpenter would be used interchangeably. It's the guy that's coming in and hanging interior doors and casing and basing, installing cabinetry, installing finished stair parts and those types of things, and also building like built-in cabinets inside the home. So
Okay, yeah, sure, that makes a lot of sense. Moving your business from doing the finishing and trim work through to just building the cabinets and delivering, are you outsourcing the work to other trim carpenters and finish joiners at the moment?
initially, that's what we did, and we've had another change in our business where we've stopped selling cabinetry directly to the general public. We only sell to showrooms and independent designers now, so we're like purely manufacturing. But the main focus was when we were still selling direct to customers, we would use independent contractors to begin with.
So now you have independent kitchen designers and companies that will come to you to build the joinery, and then you'll deliver it to them, and they'll take care of the installation
Correct.
and
Yep.
everything on site. Okay, interesting.
Yep. Yep.
That would, I'm sure that would obviously pose its own set of challenges, built like liaising and working with many different types of businesses and different people with different goals and outcomes. Talking through some of the kind of the challenges that you would face in that aspect of the business.
It has, and it's actually, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit today, but just being a mosaic shop, when you start selling to a showroom or to an independent designer, they're used to, maybe ordering out of a defined catalog, that type of thing. And here we're this custom cabinet shop that we can build whatever you draw, that kind of thing. So the challenge that we've had is developing or defining what we build, into a line essentially, and then having an offering, that we can give to them to sell and parameters to follow and that type of thing. So that's probably been the biggest challenge for us, is just defining our products and what we do.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's an area where like a lot of people, probably struggle to really define what it is they do and control the narrative over like what people are able to order from them. Like we get caught up in the kind of concept of we all want to be very custom and bespoke. While that's great, you always got to come back to the question of like, is that actually making you money at the end of the day? And is that the most effective way to run the business? So that's really fascinating. Let's have a little bit of a chat about your history with Mozaik. So how did you first hear about Mozaik? When did you first join Mozaik?
It was a short journey. I was always a SketchUp user. Just from being a finished carpenter, I would use it to, display what I'm trying to explain to a customer. Use it for cut listing even, sitting on behind the table saw, you could use it to measure and draw in 3D. It was awesome. Loved it. And I'd used that since, back in when Google owned it even. I mean, we're probably talking late 2000s or so. And when I started really focusing on cabinets, I started, looking for, all the different plugins that you could get for SketchUp and to work with dynamic components and this, that, and the next thing. And once I got serious about cabinets, I started looking hard. I think I landed first with e-cabinets maybe, and that was just for like a brief few weeks or so, playing with that. And then that got me looking. So I landed with, KCD. I'd done like just a short trial with them. Just never could get comfortable with it for me. And maybe it was just being so used to SketchUp. And then somehow I stumbled on Mozaik. And at that time, for those of us that have been around a long time, that SketchUp was the 3D viewer. We didn't have a 3D viewer back then. I mean, that's what you use to look at your products, look at the room. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is going to be great. So I remember putting in, the contact or filling out the contact form, and I spoke with Roger Taylor, called me back and had a great conversation with him, and haven't looked back. I mean, ever since we started. So 2015, I think it was version 3.8, somewhere in there when we started, and we're coming up on 14 right now.
That's right. Yeah, that's definitely going back a fair way. Thinking back to that point in time, was there any kind of like reservations about starting with Mosaic? Like anything that was a concern in making that transition?
For me, I think that I always say this is a funny anecdote when I've talked to other guys about this. I remember asking Roger, because I'd kind of done some research, and at that time it wasn't, the subscription thing was there, but it was still one of these deals where you bought it and you kind of owned it with a number of different software packages. And I remember asking Roger point blank as we were kind of talking through, so I've got this reservation about like you don't actually own it as an asset. And I remember him telling me kind of, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, you don't own any software really. You know what I mean? And then he explained too. He goes, if you look at some of the other packages that are out there, and you're buying that, by the time you get done, if you want to keep it up to date, the funds you're going to be putting towards keeping it up to date and operating are going to cost more than Mozaik. And he was right, about that. So I don't even think twice about it now, but I just thought it was kind of funny because I look back and like, what I didn't know, what I didn't know at the time is what it came down to.
That is super common as well. Like we get that a fair bit. People do call up and sort of say, they'd prefer to own something. The concept of you'd rather own a house than rent one, right? It's applying that kind of mentality to buying software, but I guess the perpetual license type deal where you're buying that license, as you mentioned, you don't have to pay updates on your house every year, and I think that's kind of like one of the fundamental differences. But also, you got to really weigh up the cost of what that ongoing upkeep is to keep software up to date. and
Yep.
also apply that against what your initial upfront investment is as well, to see if you would ever actually catch up to that initial investment with the update fees.
Correct.
And I think it's the wrong mindset to ever go into any software thinking that you could just stay on the current version.
Yeah.
The whole thing in this world is like everything moves so fast. We're constantly seeing new hardware being developed, new machinery come out, new ways of building cabinets, new types of fasteners. If you stay on like one version, you're always going to kind of fall behind in some way, and you're going to get stuck. And I think that's one thing I see in the industry is like people that are running really old versions of software, transitioning then and updating becomes such a massive thing to do, because it's like you've invested so much time and energy into like what version you're running, and then often you get kind of really stuck on that, because then the longer you leave it to update, the harder it becomes, because so much has then changed over those years. If you can imagine, coming back to that 3.8 days, trying to go from that to version 14 that's coming out soon,
Gosh.
you know,
Yeah.
that jump would just be so
Yeah.
astronomical.
Traumatic. It'd be traumatic.
Yeah, traumatic's a good
Yeah.
way to put it for sure.
Yeah.
And the sad bit is, even when you buy perpetual licenses, you still actually end up back paying for versions that you missed, and yet you didn't actually get the time to take advantage of any of those features through the years. So it's like it's a double whammy. You're hit with the backdating fees of getting up to date, but then you're also you didn't have those years of taking advantage of the advancements in the software. So yeah, it's the subscription concept has definitely changed the game. It's taken a little while for, I guess, most companies and countries around the world to be familiar with it and for it to make sense. But these days, it's like it's across everything, right? Like everything that we use throughout every aspect of life. Now it's like it's pretty crazy to think you would buy a software program these days. Like with anything, with accounting software, with software that you run. Like you're not going to go down to a computer store and buy a copy of Microsoft. You'll subscribe
Correct.
to it.
Yep.
It's just
Exactly. It,
everything's changed.
and I'm just thinking about the softwares that are in my shop. I think the only thing that's not subscription is vCarve. Now
Yeah,
that I think
yeah.
about it, I think that's the only one. I mean, everything else is some form of a subscription. So,
Yeah, and even VCarve or Vectric themselves released EasyCarve only a couple of months ago. So they're in the transition stage of moving into a subscription-based model for a lot of reasons. It's a really fair relationship on both sides of the fence. Like you think about the relationship where when you buy something from a company, after you've paid for it, then you need to hope that they're going to be there to service and help and support you over the years. Where when it's a subscription model, well, if you don't service, support, look after your customers, they'll go somewhere else. So it's a relationship that keeps both people vested in the interest of looking after each other in that sense. So yeah, no, that's really interesting, really cool that you got to back in those days talk direct with Roger as
yep,
well.
talk directly to them. Yep.
He's the OG, and he's like, I think no one does a better job of explaining things in very simple, easy to understand terms than Roger.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
you can say one sentence. I think what most people tend to take, 5 or 6 sentences to say. So, and it
Correct. Correct.
hits the
Yep.
nail on the head every
Gets right to the
time.
point.
So let's have a look at, maybe we'll talk about some of your favorite features of Mosaic, and, if you had to kind of pick a couple of things that are standouts to you over the years that have been your favorite additions that have come, like what would they be?
Um, Probably back to the basics. I mean, the big one for me would be honestly the 3D viewer. When that first came out, that was a big one that saved a lot of time. But I mean, jumping in and out of SketchUp, and then the other one, which is, I mean, currently my absolute favorite one to this. I mean, if I had to water it all down, it's the 3D viewer, and the fact that it's detachable, can live live on another screen. It just, for the users that didn't realize that wasn't, there was a day when it wasn't possible to do that. I mean, that's a feature that's just been a game changer. Running multiple screens, being able to immediately see changes and adjust things and that kind of thing. Big one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's definitely before my time with Mosaic, but like I have seen those older versions, and I can imagine the time it would have taken to, click to load the job in SketchUp, view it in SketchUp and then sort of come back into Mozaik, that transition time would, repetitively over the course of drawing a job would have been in such a massive time saver once the 3D viewer was implemented.
Well, not to mention you really couldn't see accurate machining and that kind of thing. You had to go to the part viewer for that, and then so there was some jumping around that had to be done back in the day. But you were just used to it at the time. But it was revolutionary when the 3D viewer came out. That was a big deal.
It's and the 3D viewer is a big part of what's on the cards for version 14 update as well, like a revamp of the 3D viewer, a nicer experience there, a more modern kind of experience, better options to change like field of view, for example, and set in your perspective, and being able to sort of, I guess, just get a better, more realistic view of the 3D representation as well. So it's an interesting one for you to say, because it's also a hot topic for us right now in development, where we're looking at, I guess, taking that next step with the 3D viewer and really bringing that up to modern standards.
Yep. Yep.
In terms of features that you've been kind of involved in over the years, involved in kind of suggestion, and thinking back, I think job notes might have been one that you suggested.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did push hard for that one, and again, that comes from the SketchUp layout, experience that I had, and heavy use of multi-print. I mean, that was just something I craved, was just the simple ability to, have a user definable variable that you could use. They're so powerful. I mean, you can use them everywhere, and I mean, that's one feature, honestly, that I'm excited to see. You really recently released kind of a sneak peek of version 14 materials. I loved watching the video, but I could not help but notice, room, what I mean? Room notes. And I'm like, oh man, here we go. You know what I mean? So I kind of knew it was coming, but at the same time, I'm excited for that. That level of functionality, to somebody that, cares about their drawing process, or just being able to catch those details without having to, like, I don't know, not create workarounds, but just find ways to get it on a drawing without having to manually type it every time. It's a big deal. So
how do you see yourself using that feature? Like, what's for the people out there that are not quite sure what they would do with that, like, what's an idea of how you would implement that feature?
Well, just some initial things for me is, job notes, for instance, are, in its current form. I use that to autofill a bunch of tables and things for like commercial submittals. I can put more detail in there, contractor, architect information, your material selections, and those type of things. Well, as soon as you get into a situation where you have multiple rooms in a job and multiple application, where you wish you had job notes per room, it's pretty obvious right away once you get into it. It's like, oh wait, we have to have this per room, and not being able to do that. So, and then expanded use. I think I spoke with Michael a little bit about this too, but it's just nice to be able to just more places that we can use those variables, whether it be, those, even a note, how we have the notes library now, where we could actually use that variable in the notes library, hopefully, one day, or
just be able to expand
Yep.
that into
Correct.
places.
Yep.
Sure.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you go to a lot of effort to capture the information somewhere, and the more places you can use it. And I think that's kind of like a bit of a development mindset for Mozaik, is like, when we add something, we really want it to be useful across multiple places. I think a great way of looking at software architecture is design one UI and then make that one UI repeatable in many places. And you'll see that across Mozaik. Like, you'll think about, like, using, say, assembly sheets. It's the same interface as you would use to design your labels, for example. So what we try and do is design like one kind of part of a UI that we can repeat through multiple areas of the software. Same with the concept of add in things like locks. It's the same concept for, add in, you'll see that kind of like stamp operation that is repeated in many different areas of Mozaik as well. So I think,
Advanced hinges everywhere.
when we get kind of feature requests, we'll step back and think, okay, does this involve like developing a new type of UI somewhere, and what are the other areas that we would want to address at the same time? And sometimes you can kind of put them into a bucket and go like, okay, all of these things are grouped together really nicely, and we can solve them collectively by developing something new, and thinking about all of the avenues where they can sort of tie together to make a new feature that is usable in many areas. So for sure, I'm totally on board with the concept of capturing information and then sharing it in multiple
Yep.
places.
Yep. That's awesome.
So we've spoken a little bit about your company. Tell me a little bit about like the core values and the ideas and sort of values that you carry through to the business, and what the kind of overall goal is for the business.
For me, it's simple. I want to try and keep the simple things simple as much as I possibly can within my business. Early on, there was a time where I think every cabinet shop probably has this, but they've got this list of things that they're convinced that they have to have, and that type of thing. And you soon find out, especially if you're in serious business, those items either you're going to find out your customers necessarily don't care about, or you find that it's a place where your margins can disappear. And I've done my best to keep things as simple as possible is the big one. And I try and be a leader for our team as best I can. A humble leader is probably the best way to put it. I'm still the guy that I'm more than happy to go out and sweep the floors, and I want my people and my staff to see that. And there's no job beneath us. We're a small company, so everybody's got to wear multiple hats. So
I love that. It's leading by example rather than asking people to do things for you. So, that's a great mindset to have as a business owner for sure. And, it really does create kind of like a culture within the company of people realizing that everyone's just chipping in to try and get the job done, regardless of what role you play in the business, right? Yeah, it's important for people to see that. And for the business, like just to give listeners a bit of an idea of the size of the business, like how many people work at the company, how long has the company been going for?
sure. We currently have 7 employees. I've got another engineer that does what I do in Mozaik. I've got an operations manager, and the rest is shop staff, a full-time finisher, and then builders in the shop building. So we're right sized for us. It's the plan has been not to try and keep. I'm 49, so I'm past the point of like I want to have a 50,000 square foot shop and 400 employees. I'm done with that. I want to have a profitable, fun company that can be as sustainable as possible at its current size. So
I think if you asked a lot of people with a 50,000 square foot shop and 400 employees, they'd want to go back to having 7 employees, and that fun, collaborative environment. Often the bigger things get, the more challenges that come as well. So, and in that kind of workflow that you guys, you deal with on a daily basis, like are you managing to keep the full-time finisher busy with enough work? Like, how does that balance work for
this
having a
this is
full-time
this is
person?
an area where we're working through kind of a little bit of a struggle right now. I mean, with the rise in popularity of TFL, we're seeing a lot of pre-finished panel materials hitting. At least in the U.S., it's becoming more and more popular. I mean, there's still a lot of call for finish and things like that, but I think our next step here is to probably maybe reach out, to our local market and who we put a great finish on a cabinet. I mean, I'm confident about that, and we've never really worked as an outsourced shop, for other places. But the plans maybe to start adding that just to, leak 3, 4, 5 jobs, into the booth area just to ensure that my finisher, is able to stay busy and going, and still have headroom. Obviously, if something big comes through, because we can get buried pretty fast too. So, but that's a challenge we've been facing for sure.
Especially in like once a large project rolls through, it can be overwhelming with the amount of things that need to go through a finishing line. So with you there. And in terms of even finding the right person to the right finisher, that's a skill, right? It's a bit of an art form. A lot of people think it's a simple task, but I don't know if you've ever tried it yourself, you realize there's a lot more to it.
Yep, there certainly is. So maybe one day we'll pull the trigger on an automated finishing line or something like that. Take that next step.
Like looking forward for over the next year, where do you see the business going, and what's next for Waukee Cabinetworks?
The big one for us right now, and version 14 actually fits into this, is we last year and a half we've been trying, as I explained, defining our products and kind of managing and figuring out that workflow of how a designer, ultimately could draw their projects in Mozaik for us. And the sneaky intention there for me isn't to replace my engineers or anything like that, but just cuts down the amount of time to get a project ready to get into the shop, essentially. But thinking through the mechanics of how a designer would approach or use Mozaik. These are independent designers, so they'd have to, go out and get their own account, and but it would give them a direct line to our product. They could price things on their own. Right now, we have designers send us in either 2020s or they're sending in, CAD or Revit files, that we're having to draw again in Mozaik, send them a price. There's that lag.
So they're using all different sorts of programs at the moment.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah,
Correct.
that makes it difficult, right? Because you've got to like interpret data in so many different ways. So yeah,
Right.
that's
Makes it harder, but we're hoping. The big piece that I think is the rendering. Even though for me personally, that's never been a high item on my list. I know it's a very highly requested feature. To have, and I know they'll want it. As well, and then. I think, obviously with enterprise being the way that it is now, it's so easy to set up these other seats and have, or at least even if they have their own, but if they're pulling off of your folders, you can control what they are getting into and that kind of thing. And we're excited for that part of it, and and the improvements in multi-print, especially the designers that use AutoCAD and Revit, to be able to produce a plan, that they would be proud of, I guess.
for sure. Like it's a big part of the theme around version 14 is not like improving the overall kind of concept of how you can design and produce a plan, a presentable presentation to a customer, and as well as the rendering side. So there's so many aspects of that too. Like when we really broke it down, it snowballed pretty quickly of the areas that we needed to dive into to improve that overall flow. Sort of started around the concept of let's improve the ability to set out a job first of all. A lot of designers are comfortable in CAD applications, as you mentioned. Lots of people come from SketchUp, Revit, AutoCAD, Autodesk products. Like there's various different ones, and the ability to kind of draw construction lines and use CAD to help you set out a job is a really powerful thing. So part of the concept of version 14 is allowing people to do that. So allowing people to draw CAD lines on the plan view of their products tab, and then take those CAD lines, nice CAD functions like trim, offset, extend, those kinds of things, and then allowing you to sort of turn that into something and build your products based off that layout, draw your walls based off that layout, build your products based off that layout. So, fixing first of all that problem. So like making the improvements there so people could set their jobs out better. And then, as you mentioned, the second aspect of that is like how do they present the data? So multi-print improvements to allow people to have more presentable elevations, cross sections, automating some of that too. It's crazy to me, like when I look at like the overall process, like it can take longer to set a job out in multi-print presentably than it does to actually draw the entire project.
It
And
does. It
you know,
does. It does. Yeah, it
you
does.
spend more time in multi-print, without a doubt, and we're really conscious of trying to fix that. Like really bringing automations to that space and making it quicker for people to get a really presentable drawing out the door. And beyond version 14, we've got a lot of cool ideas of how we're going to really take that to the next level as well. So some exciting things coming in that space.
That's awesome. I know the users will appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There is some really cool automation that we could do there. So yeah, we're excited to see that play out. And then the third aspect is rendering, as you mentioned. Yeah, I think you're either a kind of a shop or your workflow kind of like it needs rendering or it doesn't. It's very kind of divided in the industry. And it does come down to that like use case. Are you using Mozaik for selling? Like, are you using it to design and sell to a customer, or are you just using it for you've already sold the job and you just want to manufacture it? So there's two different avenues for sure. And as we dove into rendering, like we realized it's a complex sort of feature to add. You could add a rendering engine, and we've partnered with different ones over the years. Like we've had the Aerial Vision plugin from Render Plus, and it does a decent job. But what takes it to the next level? There's so much beyond behind the scenes that needs to happen. Like, for example, it snowballed into needing to update the entire material catalog, right? Because we now need to be able to make sure that a texture is accurately assigned to the correct material. You then need to be able to control the reflection of light on every material. So whether it's a satin, a flat finish, a sheen, a high gloss, like what the level of light reflections play out on each material. It then snowballs into what other, like being able to change colors on other aspects that make up the model. So like when you look at like you design some joinery, you look at it and you think, okay, that looks really nice, but without adding kind of like decorative items and other models to the space, like even something as simple in a kitchen as adding bar stools for the counter, or putting things on the bench, like it just, those kinds of things really help elevate a drawing and make it feel like it's a space that's lived in. And I think that's kind of like such another avenue that we needed to make sure that we improved, giving people the ability to be able to control the finishes of SketchUp models inside Mozaik without having to have lots of different SketchUp models. So that there's areas there that we've improved. And then at this stage we haven't even really got to the rendering part. These are all kind of just generic Mozaik improvements that needed to happen to make sure the end outcome was better. And then the other aspect is light. Obviously you need ability to control lights and add lights in different places. So then there's that avenue of it. And then you put all that together and you plug in a rendering engine, and then you get to the next part of the challenge. It's like lots of people, like including myself, I've got a Microsoft Surface laptop studio, decent, computer, but for rendering, probably not ideal. It's, and I think that's where most people are going to fall into that camp, right? It's like you have an okay laptop or a decent computer, but unless you have a really beefy, dedicated graphics card, rendering locally can be such a drain on your computer, and it can be time consuming. And I think everyone's interpretation of how much time is okay for rendering, like will change dramatically. Like some people will say, oh, 5 minutes per render is totally fine. Other people will say, I'm not waiting 5 minutes for a render. So there's that aspect of it. So we took it to the next stage then and thought, okay, let's look at leveraging cloud-based rendering. And the testing on that's crazy. Like, we've ran some tests where rendering it locally on a Microsoft Surface took sort of 5-10 minutes, and I could upload that to a cloud rendering server and download it within 15 seconds. So it's
Wow.
like night and day difference. I think for most people, like the cloud based option is going to be far superior and just far quicker. So yeah, there's a lot of different avenues when we dove into rendering. That version 14, been delayed slightly just based on the amount of kind of areas that snowballed into. But it's we're pretty excited about 14 for all these reasons. It really, part of the advantage of it snowballing is we got to improve everything about materials at the same time.
Yep. 14's a big one. I mean, it's a big update.
Yeah, it's thinking about your, like, the relationship with designers, I can understand that at the end of the day, like, they're trying to sell using the product. And so if it's not going to produce a nice 3D image for them, and a presentable plan, well, what it's going to be hard for you as a business owner to get them on board with using Mozaik. So hopefully version 14 will alleviate those concerns and allow you to get your designers on board. So keen to see how that
Look
plays
forward
out.
to that.
All right, so what we'll do, we'll shift gears and we'll jump into some of the community chat. So for anyone that doesn't know, you are one of the admins of the Mozaik Facebook user group and the user community. Talk me a little bit about the background on how you became an admin of the group, and how long the group's been going for, and the amount of members and that kind of thing.
Sure. Uh, the group, there had been a few iterations, I think, of Facebook groups prior to this one coming into existence. This one gained some traction right at the beginning, went from 200 to 300, 400 members. That type of thing. What's interesting about the group, the current group that most of us are in, it wasn't started by a Mozaik user. It was just some random person that was trying to help out a friend of his that had Mozaik and a CNC, and he's like, "Hey, let's start up a group," and then that's how it happened. And at that time, users I think were a little sketchy about being involved with them because we had the forum available to us, and it just wasn't like everything wasn't out there in the open. But as this thing started to grow, I think it got up to maybe 8 or 1,000 members, and you could tell that people were coming to the page regularly to ask questions. And I could see that the benefit is that you could ask those questions, maybe the questions that didn't really qualify for a ticket necessarily to send one in. They could ask that question, get a quick answer from someone. And my whole thing is it just didn't have any direction. You had people in there talking about CNCs and edge banders and this, that, and the next thing. There's plenty of other groups that are out there. And there was some, I won't call it bashing, but just like negative, not helpful, conversations that would be allowed to kind of fester in the group. And as it grew, I couldn't help but feel like it needed to be managed by someone that was a longtime user, that, as a user, I use the program every day. So, I have a vast investment, in my opinion, in the company doing well and the software being presented in a great light, and having a history of realizing that when people would make comments or complaints about Mozaik, that they just didn't, I'm not going to say they didn't know what they were talking about. They just didn't understand what was going on. And some of the issues would come from, unrelated things. There's a million ways to build a box, that kind of deal. But anyway, I think I actually reached out to you at one point because that group was kind of flying under the radar a little bit, I guess is the best way to put it. I think everybody knew it was there, but nobody talked about it. It was like, like a speakeasy or something, is what it came down to. And I remember reaching out to you, if I'm not mistaken, and the thing was, I didn't know what your situation was with Mozaik. I'm like, here's David. He's got this group on Facebook. It's, he's existing. He's out there. So I wanted to, make a connection with you and how's this working? You know what I mean? How do you have this thing set up? But anyway, through that conversation, it gave me the confidence at least to, maybe this isn't a bad thing, so I had actually just reached out to the admin and waited a couple of days for him to get back. And I just professionally asked him for control of the group. I'm like, somebody needs to take the reins on this thing. And he gave it to me. Without, there wasn't a fight. There wasn't nothing. He's like, sure. I don't even care about the group, but I'm not even paying attention to it. So I immediately, I remember one of the first things I did is I went in and changed, added rules, to it and did some other things that way. I quickly added my buddy Nick Frost as a co-admin and a few other users that we had known, and to help us kind of moderate and keep track of the group and that kind of thing. And it just grew from there is what happened. But I think we're middle 7,000s, maybe 7,500, 7,600 members. It might even be more than that, to be honest with you. I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to it, but it's grown. That's for darn sure.
And it's that's the thing about like Facebook groups and communities in general, right? Is like it's so important for the greater good of the community to keep the conversation both on topic but also positive as well. And that's not to say that there can't be negative feedback, because that's important. Like, in any company can really grow and benefit from that. But it needs to be a space where I think it's the bit that I'm trying to get to is I think it's important that it's a space where anyone can feel that they can voice an opinion and it can be heard one way or another. Like, it's not just shut down or it's not just bashing someone for, voicing an opinion maybe that the group doesn't agree with. Like, it just, a collaborative space is really what's key. And I guess that's the challenge with like all Facebook communities and groups in general. Even where I live, we have a local Facebook community for the area, and it's just such a negative space, and it's really it's a difficult thing as an admin to keep any group, I think, positive and just on track with having valuable conversations that will actually go somewhere. And what you've achieved that, and I think that's amazing, because what it's turned into is then this group where people can go to ask questions and get lots of different answers from lots of different people using the software in many different ways. And I think that's not just about how to use Mozaik, but everything connected to it. It's about, it might be a question about they're stuck on something with their machine, or it might be a question about they're stuck on something with a certain material or a certain hardware item. And it's the collective knowledge that bringing every cabinet maker together around not just America but other parts of the world, and putting them in one place. It's really cool to see that play out and see the information shared. And I know myself, I've learned so much from the group, just by being part of it, and contributing in different ways as well. And I think the one thing that I love about the group is just how many people contribute. Like, a lot of groups can get kind of stuck in just, only a handful of people really contributing. And I think over the years now, what we've seen play out is many of the different trainers from Mozaik getting involved in the group as well. And that's really, that's amazing to see, because, I don't think many people realize it's like, the passion behind the Mozaik team. Like, these guys are doing this of an evening, they're sitting on their lounge, at 9 o'clock at
Still,
night.
still at work helping, willing to help.
It's and that's the thing. It doesn't come from a place of like, we consider this work. We're all in this together, in the sense of like, it's this journey of like, making a product better, serving a community of people, being part of that community. And I can imagine the amount of like hours that you as an admin must put into just
I don't want to know. I'll be honest with you. Between the Facebook page and the forum, the official forum, just jumping in and out of those, it's on at least one of my screens throughout the day. It's something else, but it's like, wow. But
yeah. I can imagine. Gosh, if
and
you
the
had to
thing
make
and
that.
the thing is, I don't even use Facebook for any personal reason. I literally, it's these business groups that we're all, many of us are in. That's where I found, I don't even really use it for anything other than that. But
Yeah, I think Facebook has evolved over the years for that, right? Like, a lot of people probably used to use it personally, and now really I'm the same. The only reason I'll go on Facebook is to look at the community groups and to see, what's going on and what questions there are. And, it's fun to be part of that. And, yeah, throughout the years too, like, I think that's brought a lot of different people together. Obviously, we've been able to connect through those groups, and through you originally reaching out for advice on getting involved with the group, and how to bring light to that group as well. And yeah, and then obviously from there, that's kind of evolved into user groups coming together at events and things like that as well. I know you guys, for the listeners that might not know, like, you can share a little bit about how that works, and that you guys sort of do like user group meetups at some of the trade events and things as well.
yep, yep. And it's not just me. I mean, I can't even really take credit for some of these meetups that's been done. I mean, there's, obviously other prominent members, that are of the group that everybody kind of knows of their names and that kind of thing. And, the last IWF, we did take advantage of, trying to get as many of the groups together as we could, just to put faces to names, and that kind of thing. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, you're in an environment where, everybody's at a tool show, and it's a fun time, that it was nice to put faces to names and shake hands and hang out and just chat. So it was pretty cool.
Exactly. And for us, like, I remember at one of the last trade shows, a group of us, like Mozaik trainers, are walking back to the hotel after a long day at the show. And you walk past the bar and you see a table full of like 30 or 40 Mozaik customers, all just having a beer and chatting. And it's like,
Can't
you
escape
know
it.
yeah, but it's so good. Like, we all came in and joined in and had a beer with you guys. And I think that's just, that's part of that experience, and that's part of the community that I'm referring to. It's more than just a software provider and customer relationship. It's like, I think when you get down to that community level, it's so much more than that. So it's
Well,
yeah.
and then the thing that I've found too, David, is the user group, the membership, the ones I've met, and I've met a lot of them, talked to a lot of them, and this would extend to the staff too. I mean, they're great people. I mean, there's a lot of really awesome people that are passionate about it. That are part of the team and the user community. And these are just like people that if they lived in your local city, you'd be friends with them. You know what I mean? Or that type of thing. I mean, just good people. But it's pretty awesome to see.
Honestly, my favorite reason for going to trade shows is really just the opportunity to connect with everyone and get to know people as well and get to meet people face to face. And, like obviously, one of the things that I've done over the years is create the Mosaic Mastery course. And I think a lot of different people have used that. And then, it's really humbling for me to go to a show and people to come up and sort of, mention how useful that's been for them and just put a face to a name. And it's really really cool because a lot of people might like they'll feel like they know me because they've listened to me bang on about Mosaic in training videos for so long. And it's so nice for me to meet them and understand how that's made a difference and an impact on their business as well. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
That's got to be one of the most referred things, and I mean within the group because it's a great starter. It's more than just that. It's something you can refer back to. I know when I actually added it because I remember I think I even reached out to him like, hey, I know this is Australian New Zealand market, but can I buy this or can I get oh yeah, or can I share this in our group, that type of thing. And I know for me it was pivotal in training new employees or showing them things. I mean, for me, I remember the first profound thing that I had just once I had downloaded that and used it or had access to it was the pricing videos. There was never really a lot of solid videos on the pricing part of it, creating reports and that kind of thing. And I mean, that alone for me was like perfect. This is great, but you did a good job with that. You did.
I appreciate that feedback. It's it sort of stemmed from a place of I've worked in the software game for a long time, and I truly believe kind of like I did a lot of face-to-face training with customers over the years. Used to travel all around Australia and New Zealand, installing software and teaching software, and it was so deflating every day. Like leaving site, going to a hotel room, and realizing like probably 50 to 60, maybe even 70% of what I showed someone that day would be forgotten the next day. Because it's like it's overwhelming. I mean, we used to do like 4 or 5 days in a row on site with people, and like yeah, it's like information overload. You could
Yeah. Drinking
like
from a fire
within
hose.
yeah within like 2 hours, people's eyes are rolling back in their head, like just overwhelmed with information, and you get to a point where you just can't contain anymore. So it's so I believe in the concept of education through bite-sized bits of information, consumable bits where you can like watch a video, learn something new, put it into practice, come back next week and do the same thing, the next day or whatever it is. But it's like you'll progress so much more doing kind of that bite-size bit of, and it's the same thing for online training. Now we do it via Zoom. We've got the ability to record those sessions and people rewatch them, and I think that's like it's capturing the conversation, and I think that's just so valuable compared
It
to
is.
standing there in person. Even though, and I mean, I do miss going to shops and getting to see like the shops firsthand and in person. That's definitely an aspect of it that's really cool to see. But I know how much more how many more people we can reach this way, and also just helping them out. So, all right, so we're going to change pace a little bit here. If, let's ask some sort of thought-provoking questions or a bit of fun questions. If Mosaic had to have a theme song, what would it be?
Anything that doesn't include Taylor Swift and I'm trying to think of some other ones. I'm not. Michael McDonald would be another one that just make my skin crawl. But I've recently seen through the back channels here that K Rob has got a new single out named I think it's Gremlins. Okay, Ken Roberts putting something together, but it's a pretty good song. I think that's a good Mosaic theme song.
We might have to work that into this podcast and put a little snippet there for the listeners to
Yes,
hear.
there you go.
It's, uh,
There you go.
for those that don't know, can use kind of like an AI tool to create a music song about Mosaic. So we'll
It's
share that for
classic.
some of the listeners to hear. And I laughed so hard when I listened to that. It
Same
was
here.
Opened up Mozaik, thought I'd catch up. But my libraries are missing, and this park don't fit. I swear it ain't me, must be some kind of glitch. My cut list's a mess, my tenants don't line, my dado depth's wrong, I swear they were fine. My tool set is right, I know what I saved, so why has my CNC gone rogue today? Everything is going wrong for me, so I blame the updates.
classic. But oh man, it's our VP Michael Dunphy would be devastated to hear that you're not a Swiftie. He's
Yeah,
he's
I'm sure.
and he's one of the biggest Swifties going around. So it's let's have a chat about like thinking back. Like, are there any kind of like funny moments or strange things that have happened over the years of using Mosaic? Like anything that comes to mind of a funny story to tell?
I mean, there's been a number of little things. I mean, the one that I can think of, and this would have been back in, I don't know, 2018, 19, or 20, maybe yeah, 18, 19. I had this huge job, and somehow I inadvertently like outset a filler like 4 miles, okay? And I could not for I literally thought I killed Mozaik because I would open up, the 3D viewer, and like I've got this huge room with all these cabinets, and it's like a speck on my screen, and I'm like, what am I doing? But and it's funny you brought this up because literally yesterday someone in the group had posted about they like increased the elevation of an outlet like a lot of inches, and they like I can't even zoom into it. It's like I always know what it is when I see it, but I just remember like it took a while for me to figure out like what did I do? I couldn't figure it out, but I literally thought I broke Mozaik at that time. I'm not gonna lie. So, but that's my funny moment.
That's exactly what Ken's song is about, Gremlins. Because I think that when that happens, most of the time the assumption is that that's a gremlin. There's something. Yeah, I updated Mosaic, and now all of a sudden, my my elevations and floor plans are tiny little speck on the screen. So it's that's classic. I love that. So what's the biggest lesson you've learnt from using Mosaic over the years? Like, what would be through your Mosaic journey? If you had to boil it down to one sentence, what would be the lesson?
For me, it's been keep things simple, simplify things. I know that's probably not a popular answer, but I mean it's really kind of the basis that Mozaik is built on. Keep the simple things simple. I've mentioned it earlier too, and there was a time when I maybe built a cabinet with multiple materials and these details that I just thought that had to be there and that kind of thing. And but just using Mosaic, realizing that if I simplified things, things would be a lot easier to manage. And then also just watching the user community, whole entire sections of the user community embrace that simplification piece. It's been very impactful on my business.
That's a really great answer. Like we see it all the time. Like people want to adopt new technology, new software, new machinery, but do things the same way that they've always done them. And it's a great opportunity when you're adopting technology, be it a CNC machine or any type of new machinery and software, to really take the step back and rethink. Are you doing something the way that maybe your dad or your granddad, always did things? Because a lot of those decisions were based on limitations at the time. It might have been, you're cutting something on a saw and you had to stick to sizes that worked for the saw, or I guess the nesting machine changed a lot of the limitations of being able to cut parts out. So I think it's like a really good opportunity. And like lots of those decisions were based around what was easy to remember or calculate when I was manually doing a cutting list for a saw. And you're like, all those limitations don't exist now. So, maybe rethink that in today's terms of what would be the best way to do that. So I think that's a great great answer of just keeping it simple. And but when you embrace technology, maybe questioning, are you overcomplicating something that could be easier? So
Correct. Yeah. And it's easy to do. It's easy to do.
oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And like, I mean, on our side of the fence, it's crazy the amount of ways there are to build a box, because we see it from everyone. So
And
so
that's the truth, and that's the truth behind it is there are, you think about all the different ways to build a box, and they are boxes at the end of the day, right? And find what works best for you and simplify it is what I would say, for sure.
love it, love it. So where can people connect with you if they want to reach out, or if they've got any questions, or for anyone listening to this podcast, be it if it's a member of the community that wants to reach out and just have a chat?
Sure. Well, they can always check us out on our website. It's WaukeeCabinetworks.com. As far as me personally, run a business, so a busy guy. But if you're a Mozaik user, you can usually find me at inside the Facebook group. Been frequenting the Mozaik forum quite a bit more lately, just trying to build traction in there as well, and lots of great information in there. To dig up and mine as well. And but those are common places you're going to find me, I guess.
Sounds good. Yep.
Yeah.
And obviously at the trade shows, no doubt. Are you planning on attending AWFS this year?
Yeah, we'll be at AWFS, and I'm going to go down. I think we're going to go down to the Closet Expo as well. Where is it at? It's in Florida this year, first part of June. So we'll be down there for that as well. I think you guys are going to be there as well. So, or some of you will be there.
And I think you might have mentioned to me previously that the Closet Expo last year, I believe, was the catalyst behind a pretty major development of Mozaik Trainer.
That was a fun one because we've all some of us have all met Bill, right? I mean, or in person, and we've certainly heard his voice, but he did not want a Facebook account. I don't need that, he says. But what's funny about the expo last year, I think there was two things that happened. One is Michael and the whole crew, they got kicked out of the hotel, evacuated because of, I think the fire alarms went off or something. So I'm in the middle of the night, getting ready for the show the next day. But Bill Johnston, Bill Mozaik, shows up at that show without a Facebook account. He left that show as Bill Mozaik against his will, is really what happened. But it's worked out great. It's worked out great. I think he really enjoys, that moniker for sure.
He really does. And it's been actually incredible having him involved in the user community.
Yeah, such a great guy.
Yeah, his passion and his way of explaining things, he will say that extra bit of detail that most other people wouldn't say, and it's that one exact thing that needed to be said to really have a light bulb moment for someone. Like he's got a knack for doing that, and yeah,
absolutely,
all around great guy, and can't wait to connect with him on one of these podcast episodes as well. I'm sure that'll be quite a good one. Yeah, without a doubt. And in summary, like any final pieces of advice in terms of users looking to improve their workflow, or for anyone out there that's listening that's not using software at the moment, why would you recommend Mozaik?
I would say probably for the Mozaik users, the big thing I try and preach is just be intentional about your process in Mozaik. Trying to, if you don't have a workflow, develop a workflow and then do your best to follow that. A lot of us are trying to cut a job the day that it needs to go onto the machine, or trying to design a job the day it needs to go onto the machine. You're missing things, those type of things. I always tell my staff it's kind of a thing that I've always said over the years, but I'd rather have you stare at the wall for 10 minutes thinking about your next step and the best way to do it, than to just kind of, I'm busy. Look at me. I'm grabbing this from here and I'm going over here and doing this. So I've used that same concept in Mozaik and, think through things, set up your material templates and your different settings intentionally. Think about those things, I guess, is what I would say. And then anybody that's looking for software, Mozaik's got an amazing community that's going to help support you. It's an excellent choice in software if you're going to be in the cabinet industry at all kinds of level. Whether you're a table saw shop, a shop with one CNC, or you're a shop with 10 CNCs at this point, and other ancillary equipment, drill and dowel machines and all of that. So it applies to a number of shops, and that was what I would say the biggest thing from my experience is I don't regret my choice of Mozaik. I'm so glad that it made me grow. Like, I grew as a company because of Mozaik, but it grew with me, and it's pretty cool to look back on that and think, I made a good choice on the software. I still haven't hit the ceiling on this thing. There's a lot yet that I don't even use in Mozaik still to this point. I mean, missing capabilities that I'm not even taking advantage of. So it's awesome program in that regard.
Oh, we appreciate that feedback, man. And thinking about your comment there about it growing with you, I think you've recently made the transition into the enterprise level of Mozaik. Any kind of standout features that come to mind for you there?
We added enterprise the day it was available. I mean, and been happy. I've been right in there since day one. Big one for me is the biggest one for me is optimizer runs. We used to break jobs up quite a bit. That kind of thing. Job dashboard's awesome. We make, that's a great way to review a job easily. There's some other, a lot of other benefits actually, but for us from a production standpoint, it is just awesome. To be able to lock a room, run, optimize that one room, and be able to come back and instead of having the extra copies of jobs and that kind of thing going on, really smooths the edges there. Stay down cutting, huge for my CNC. That's been a big one, a really big one.
Some great advantages. I think the optimizer runs, I think once you've used that, God, it's hard to go back from. It's one of those.
Go back.
Yeah.
It's out. It's funny because I've been on Enterprise since day one. I can't answer questions in the group very much about feature sets. Like, it doesn't do this because I'm starting to forget where the hierarchy starts and ends. You know what I mean? In between, like, I have the basics, but I wouldn't give up any of the features that I have access to. There's no way. So,
and I mean, Enterprise is only a year and a half in existence. It's still such a new product for us that so many plans for really cool things coming there. So, I think over the next few years, people are going to really be blown away by what it's going to be able to do. So exciting times ahead for that. And going back to your advice for the group, I think for the people that are using Mozaik, and that's such great advice. And I think it kind of comes back to something from me going through my trade as a cabinet maker. It was always drilled into me was two phrases that come to mind. One of them was measure twice, cut once, that concept of pause in, double check, just measure it again, make sure, cut it once. It really is along those same lines. And I did my trade learning to install kitchens and joinery at this company that had a German traveler that was their installer, and he kind of moved over to Australia and ended up living in Australia. But he was a cranky German guy that would always just drill into me. He'd be like, proper preparation prevents poor performance. It just, kind of and it was just my job to assist him as an apprentice at the time was just get the preparation right, lay the foundation out. And, he would spend so long just leveling bases because he just knew once he got everything, all the toes leveled and everything set, the rest would flow so simply. And I think applying those kind of lessons to every aspect of using Mozaik is kind of such a good shout that if you take the time before you dive in and just start drawing, set out the job settings, set out the room settings, get everything dialed in, because it's so easy to dive in and start drawing walls, and then you're spending so much extra time circling back. So, man, I think you nailed that piece of advice for sure.
Yep, that's awesome.
That's cool. Well, man, look, Jason, I really appreciate your time. chatting with me today. I know, so many people in the community already know who you are, and it'd be great for everyone else to kind of get to know you. So hopefully through this, we've made that possible. Thanks again, man. And
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave, I just wanted to make sure and say, thank you. A big one for me is, and I'm going to just speak on behalf of the user base. Okay, it's obvious to all of us what a huge force you've been, since you've been in, and we're been part of Mozaik, and we're just so happy to have you on the team. You're approachable. You articulate answers very well. I mean, it's just what an addition, and we're just glad to have you.
I
On the
appreciate
team.
that, man. I appreciate that exactly, and that's how I view it, man. It's like it's such a team response. I love being part of this community, and yeah, no, like if anyone out there is listening or watching this, like at the next trade show, if you see me, come say hi. Like I'd love to have a chat and get to know more people. That's what, to me, that's what it's all about. Like I'm passionate about getting to know the people that are part of this journey. So yeah, no, look, I really appreciate that feedback, man. Very humbling to hear, and yeah, super happy to be part of the whole thing. So
Well, you
thanks,
enjoy the
man.
rest of your Friday. I'll enjoy my Thursday. Okay.
That sounds good.